Welcome to the Design Portal BootCamp lesson on exporting and importing global entities. The Design Portal allows you to export your app's global entities for a multitude of reasons, including data backup, data migration, and external tool integration. In this lesson, you'll learn how to export your global entity data, which format of JSON object file to use, and how to migrate your app's global entity data to a different brainCloud app. From the dashboard, click Global, then Global Data, followed by Global Entities. On this screen, you can see the two global entities that we created in the previous lesson. If you click the Filter by Type drop-down list, you can then select an entity type to filter by. Click the Bulk Actions button. As you can see, there are two types of JSON object files, raw and simplified, that we can export our global entities as. Let's download both types and we'll compare the differences. Then I'll detail the intended use cases for each type of JSON object file. Once both JSON object files have been downloaded, open them both in your preferred code editor. Upon first glance, you'll notice that the raw JSON object file contains all the metadata that is returned when we get global entities in the getListByIndexedID request, whereas the simplified JSON object file omits data fields like time to live and created at. Scrolling down, we can see that the simplified JSON object file omits the rest of the brainCloud metadata. The only data that is included is the entity ID, which is encoded as _EIID, and the entity type, which is represented by the enclosing array. This is intentional, of course. The raw JSON object file is intended for backups and data migration, since it includes all the brainCloud related metadata, whereas the simplified JSON object file is intended to be used for external tool integration. The lack of data makes the object easier to read and understand. Now that we know the differences and the intentions behind both types, let's return to the Design Portal. Click the Weapon Data entity. When the side pane slides out, click the Delete button to delete the entity. Then click the Enemy Data entity. Click the Delete button to delete the entity. Click the Bulk Actions button and select Import from Simplified JSON object file. Please note that the entity data is imported on an entity type by entity type basis. That means that if you have any existing global entities with a matching entity type to an entity that we are importing, then that existing global entity will be deleted. Click Choose File. Select the Simplified JSON object file. Click Upload. The first global entity to import is the enemy data. You have an opportunity on this pane to set the entity's ACL, since the simplified JSON object file doesn't contain an ACL value. Click Import, then click Next. The next global entity to import is weapon data. Click Import, then click Finish. If we compare the original global entities that we deleted a moment ago to the imported global entities, you'll notice that the entity IDs are completely different, and that's because the brainCloud metadata is not preserved with the simplified JSON object file. Delete both global entities. Click the Bulk Actions button and select Import from Raw JSON object file. A reminder that any existing global entities with a matching entity type to an entity that we are importing will be deleted. Click Choose File. Select the Raw JSON object file. Click Upload. The first global entity to import is the enemy data. Notice that the fields contain all the brainCloud metadata. Click Import, then click Next. The next global entity to import is weapon data. Click Import, then click Finish. Comparing the original global entities to the imported global entities, you'll notice that the entity IDs are now the exact same. In fact, all the brainCloud metadata is the same as it was before we deleted the global entities. As mentioned earlier, the raw JSON object file is intended to be used for data backups and data migration. Speaking of data migration, we can import the global entity data on a completely different brainCloud app. This is very useful if you have global entity data that is going to be used by multiple brainCloud apps. Near the top, click Team. Then click Test App. This is an empty brainCloud app that I use for testing. On the left, click Global, then Global Data, followed by Global Entities. Click the Bulk Actions button and select Import from Raw JSON object file. Click Choose File. Select the raw JSON object file. Click Upload. Click Import, then click Next. Click Import, then click Finish. Comparing the original Design Portal BootCamp's global entities to the test app's imported global entities, you'll notice that the entity IDs are the exact same even though the app is different. Shared entities is the next lesson in the Design Portal BootCamp.